Arthur Montoro is used to the world bending to his will. His wealth and power open every door. But when he crosses paths with Amanda Ribeiro, a fiercely independent violinist who sees past his money and status, his life takes an unexpected turn. Captivated by her beauty and resilience, Arthur is determined to win her heart. Amanda, however, has built her life on self-reliance, navigating a world that often judges her for her background. The last thing she needs is to fall for a man who represents everything she distrusts. But as Arthur sheds the layers of his privileged life to show Amanda his true self, secrets from his family's past threaten to tear them apart. In this emotional journey of love and redemption, Amanda and Arthur must decide if their connection can overcome the divide between their worlds, or if the truth will be the end of their unlikely romance. Arthur Montoro has everything a man could want: wealth, power, and a world that bends to his every whim. But when the billionaire unexpectedly crosses paths with Amanda Ribeiro, a fiercely independent violinist, his life takes a turn he never saw coming. Struck by her beauty and captivated by her resilience, Arthur is determined to win her heart. However, Amanda is unimpressed by his riches and status, and she's far more focused on her music and her dreams than on the advances of a man who's used to getting what he wants. Amanda has faced her share of struggles, carving her place in a world that often judges her for both her skin color and her modest background. The last thing she needs is to be swept into the orbit of a man who represents everything she distrusts. But as Arthur makes clumsy yet sincere attempts to show her he's different, cracks begin to form in her defenses. As secrets from Arthur's past begin to surface, both he and Amanda are forced to confront their deepest fears. In a twist of fate, Amanda realizes that Arthur's influence might have saved her from a devastating injustice she never saw coming. Now, they must both decide if love can bridge the gap between two very different worlds. Arthur Montoro. Physical description. Arthur is a 35-year-old white man with sharp, aristocratic features. He has slicked-back dark brown hair, piercing blue eyes, and a well-maintained, athletic build. Always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, he exudes confidence and control. Backstory. Born into extreme wealth, Arthur was raised in the public eye, groomed to take over his family's multi-billion-dollar business empire. His parents were distant, leaving him to be raised by nannies and tutors, which instilled in him a sense of loneliness despite his privilege. Accustomed to getting everything he wants, Arthur never had to fight for anything, until he met Amanda. Amanda Ribeiro. Physical description. Amanda is a 28-year-old black woman with striking natural beauty. She has medium brown skin, expressive brown eyes, and wears her natural hair in soft curls. Standing at 5 feet 6 inches, she has a graceful, slender build, often dressed in simple yet elegant outfits that reflect her artistic nature. Backstory. Amanda grew up in a working-class neighborhood, raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs to support her. A gifted violinist from a young age, she earned a scholarship to a prestigious music conservatory. Despite her talent, Amanda constantly faced prejudice both as a woman and as a black artist. She is determined to make her mark in the world on her own terms, without relying on anyone, especially not a rich man like Arthur. Lucas Montoro. Physical description. Lucas, Arthur's younger brother, is 32 with a more laid-back style. He has the same dark brown hair and blue eyes, but sports a scruffy beard and prefers casual wear like jeans and leather jackets. He's fit but not as polished as Arthur. Backstory. Lucas has always lived in his brother's shadow, enjoying the wealth and perks of their family's status without the same responsibilities. Unlike Arthur, Lucas is more free-spirited and rebellious, leading to a strained relationship with his family. He often serves as Arthur's confidant, pushing him to rethink his approach to love and life. Marta Ribeiro. Physical description. Marta, Amanda's mother, is a 55-year-old black woman with a warm, nurturing presence. She has salt and pepper hair, usually tied in a bun, and wears modest clothing. Her face is marked by years of hard work, but carries a quiet strength. Backstory. A domestic worker all her life, Marta raised Amanda with strict values of independence and hard work. Despite her own struggles, she always supported Amanda's dream of becoming a musician. She's protective of Amanda and wary of Arthur's intentions, but she is also keenly aware of the importance of second chances and growth. Arthur's penthouse, New York City. A modern, luxurious penthouse located in Manhattan, Arthur's home is a symbol of his wealth and status. With floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, sleek, minimalist furniture, and expensive art adorning the walls, it is a place that exudes power and success but feels cold and impersonal. This setting reflects Arthur's isolated and unfulfilled life. Amanda's apartment, Brooklyn. Amanda's modest apartment is a cozy, artistic space that reflects her personality and creative pursuits. The walls are lined with sheet music, paintings, and books on classical music. Her violin is always within reach, resting in an open case on her worn-out couch. The space is warm and inviting, filled with personal touches that contrast Arthur's sterile environment. The concert hall. This grand concert hall is where Amanda regularly performs with her orchestra. It's a space filled with history and prestige, with its red velvet seats, ornate chandeliers, and excellent acoustics. Despite its elegance, Amanda feels the weight of judgment and expectations when she plays here, as she is often one of the few black musicians. Montoro Family Estate, Connecticut. A sprawling, old-money mansion in the countryside, the Montoro Estate is where Arthur and his brother Lucas grew up. The mansion is elegant but carries a sense of emotional distance, with large, echoing rooms and immaculately maintained grounds. Family gatherings here are often cold and formal, and the estate is a symbol of the wealth that has both provided for and isolated Arthur. The Jazz Club, Harlem. A vibrant and soulful jazz club where Amanda occasionally performs. The intimate space, dimly lit with exposed brick walls, serves as a sanctuary for her creativity. It is also where Arthur first sees Amanda in a more relaxed setting, gaining a deeper appreciation for her world. The club is filled with music, warmth, and a sense of community, in stark contrast to Arthur's world. Setting: Amanda's rehearsal studio. Summary: Arthur decides to attend Amanda's rehearsal, showing up with a gift, not flowers or jewelry, but a rare music score by one of her favorite composers. Amanda is taken aback by the gesture, but remains guarded, thanking him but declining his further attempts to meet. Cause and effect. Arthur's shift to a thoughtful approach catches Amanda off guard. While she doesn't accept his advances, she begins to see that he may not be as shallow as she assumed. Setting: Amanda's violin class. She teaches young students. Summary: Amanda teaches a group of young musicians, something that gives her great joy. During the class, she reflects on Arthur's gesture and wonders why a man like him would go out of his way for someone like her. She confides in her friend and fellow musician, Nina, about the encounter. Cause and effect. Nina encourages Amanda to give Arthur a chance, subtly planting a seed of doubt about her strict refusal to engage with him. Setting: Jazz club. Summary: Amanda performs at a local jazz club, and Arthur, having done his research, shows up unannounced. This time, instead of grand gestures, he simply watches her play, enjoying the music. After the performance, he approaches her casually, and they talk, this time with more ease. Cause and effect. Amanda, seeing Arthur in a more laid-back setting, begins to lower her guard. She agrees to have a drink with him, marking a turning point in their relationship. Setting: the jazz club bar. Summary: Arthur and Amanda share a drink at the club. Arthur opens up about his life, admitting he feels trapped by his wealth and status. Amanda shares her struggles as a black woman in the music industry. They bond over their shared experiences of isolation, albeit from very different worlds. Cause and effect. Amanda starts to see Arthur as more than just a wealthy man. She's still cautious but intrigued by his vulnerability. This sets up the potential for further connection. Setting: Amanda's apartment. Summary: Back home, Amanda reflects on her conversation with Arthur. She begins to question her initial assumptions about him, but reminds herself of her personal and professional priorities. Amanda decides to keep her focus on her upcoming concert, despite feeling conflicted. Cause and effect. Amanda's internal conflict deepens, setting the stage for her eventual emotional shift in the following chapters. Setting: Montoro Family Estate. Summary: Arthur visits his family's estate to discuss business matters. During dinner, tension arises between Arthur and his parents, particularly about his involvement with Amanda. His parents disapprove of Amanda, seeing her as beneath him, which only fuels Arthur's desire to be with her. Cause and effect. This scene reveals the class divide between Arthur's world and Amanda's, and Arthur's growing rebellion against his family's expectations. Setting: Amanda's conservatory. Summary: Amanda faces mounting pressure from her conservatory director, who hints that her position might be jeopardized due to funding cuts. She's stressed about her career and becomes increasingly unsure about whether she should allow Arthur into her life. Cause and effect. Amanda's financial and professional struggles highlight the sharp contrast between her life and Arthur's. This adds to her internal conflict, complicating her feelings for him. Setting: the concert hall. Summary: Arthur arranges for Amanda's conservatory to receive a generous donation, which secures her position. However, when Amanda finds out, she's furious. She feels as though Arthur is trying to control her life with his money, reinforcing her initial distrust. Cause and effect. This creates a rift between them. Amanda sees Arthur's action as patronizing, while Arthur doesn't understand why his attempt to help backfired. The tension between them escalates. Setting: Amanda's apartment. Summary: Arthur confronts Amanda at her apartment, trying to explain his actions. They argue, with Amanda accusing him of trying to buy her affection. Arthur, frustrated, admits he doesn't know how to show her he cares without using the tools he's always relied on: money and power. Cause and effect. This emotional confrontation brings Arthur's insecurities to the surface, while Amanda's distrust of him grows. It seems like their relationship might be doomed. Setting: Arthur's penthouse. Summary: Arthur confides in Lucas, who tells him he's going about things the wrong way. Lucas advises him to show Amanda who he really is, without the wealth and status. Arthur realizes he needs to make a genuine change if he's going to win Amanda's trust. Cause and effect. Arthur's realization sets up his decision to change his approach, leading to a major turning point in their relationship in the next chapter. Setting: Amanda's neighborhood. Summary: Arthur shows up at Amanda's door, not with a grand gesture, but with an invitation to spend time together without the trappings of his wealth. He suggests they visit a local art gallery, a place he knows she loves. Cause and effect. Amanda, though hesitant, agrees. This marks the first time she sees Arthur without the influence of his wealth, creating an opportunity for genuine connection. Setting: local art gallery. Summary: at the art gallery, Amanda and Arthur talk about their passions: art, music, and life. Arthur listens more than he speaks, allowing Amanda to guide the conversation. This shift in dynamic helps Amanda see him in a new light. Cause and effect. Amanda begins to soften toward Arthur, realizing he's making an effort to change. Their bond deepens as they start to understand each other on a more personal level. Setting: Amanda's apartment. Summary: after the art gallery, Arthur and Amanda share an intimate conversation at her apartment. Arthur opens up about his insecurities, and Amanda shares the struggles she faced growing up. The emotional walls between them start to crumble. Cause and effect. This heart-to-heart marks a significant turning point in their relationship as both characters become more vulnerable with each other. The revelation setting: Arthur's penthouse. Summary: Arthur discovers through his family that his parents were involved in a scandal that Amanda's family was unknowingly connected to, involving business practices that harmed her community. Arthur is torn between his loyalty to his family and his growing love for Amanda. Cause and effect. This revelation creates internal conflict for Arthur, leading to the climax of the story. He knows he must tell Amanda the truth, but he fears losing her. Setting: Arthur's penthouse. Summary: Arthur struggles with whether to tell Amanda the truth about his family's involvement in the scandal. He seeks advice from Lucas, who encourages him to come clean. Cause and effect. Arthur's decision to be honest sets up the climactic moment in Chapter 5. Setting: Amanda's apartment. Summary: Arthur confesses to Amanda about his family's role in the scandal that affected her community. Amanda is devastated, feeling betrayed not only by him but by the system she's fought against her whole life. Cause and effect. This revelation creates a rift between them. Amanda, feeling deeply hurt, pushes Arthur away. Setting: Amanda's apartment. Summary: Amanda spends time alone, reflecting on everything that's happened. She questions whether she can trust Arthur again, but also recognizes the genuine effort he made to change. Cause and effect. Amanda's internal struggle sets the stage for her eventual decision to either forgive or move on. Setting: Jazz club. Summary: Arthur shows up at Amanda's final jazz performance, where he makes one last plea for her forgiveness. He admits his faults but expresses his deep love for her, promising to fight for their relationship. Cause and effect. Arthur's heartfelt declaration leaves Amanda torn, as she must decide whether to forgive him. Setting: Amanda's apartment. Summary: After the performance, Amanda confronts her feelings and decides to meet Arthur one last time. She tells him that trust will take time to rebuild, but she's willing to try. Cause and effect. Amanda's decision to give Arthur a second chance marks the resolution of their conflict. Setting: Amanda's neighborhood. Summary: Arthur and Amanda begin to rebuild their relationship, this time with more honesty and mutual respect. They spend time in Amanda's world, far from the trappings of Arthur's wealth. Cause and effect. Their relationship grows stronger as they learn to navigate their differences. Setting: Montoro family estate. Summary: Arthur confronts his parents about their role in the scandal and their attitudes toward Amanda. He tells them that he's choosing to live his life differently, prioritizing his happiness over their expectations. Cause and effect. This scene marks Arthur's personal growth and his decision to stand up to his family for what he believes in. Setting: Amanda's apartment. Summary: Amanda receives an offer to perform at a prestigious concert hall, marking a significant step forward in her career. She credits her success to staying true to herself, despite the challenges she's faced. Cause and effect. Amanda's professional success parallels her personal growth, showing that she can have both love and career on her own terms. Setting: The jazz club. Summary: Arthur proposes to Amanda in the same jazz club where they first bonded. This time, it's a simple, heartfelt gesture, far from the grand displays of wealth he once used. Cause and effect. Amanda accepts, marking the culmination of their emotional journey and their new life together. Setting: Arthur's penthouse, now their shared home. Summary: The story ends with Arthur and Amanda starting their new life together, free from the expectations of others. Their relationship is now built on love, trust, and mutual respect. Cause and effect. This final scene brings the story full circle, showing how both characters have changed and grown together. The late afternoon sun reflected off the glass skyscrapers as Arthur Montoro strode down the busy Manhattan street, phone in hand, listening intently to his business associate. The impending merger was monumental, and his mind was laser-focused on closing the deal. The world seemed to move out of his way, until it didn't. With a sudden jolt, he collided with someone, spilling hot coffee onto his tailored suit. "Watch where you're going," a sharp voice snapped. Arthur blinked, turning his gaze down to the woman standing before him. Amanda Ribeiro. A mess of coffee dripped down her jacket, her violin case slung over her shoulder. Her dark eyes flashed with irritation as she wiped the stain from her clothes. I'm sorry," Arthur stammered, momentarily taken aback. Apologies weren't something he was accustomed to giving. Amanda, barely glancing up, dismissed him with a wave. "Just be more careful," she muttered, already turning to walk away, her graceful figure disappearing into the crowd. Arthur stood there, dumbfounded, watching as the woman who had just scolded him left without another thought. The phone at his ear buzzed, pulling him back to reality. He murmured a brief excuse to his associate, still distracted by the unexpected encounter. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, she lingered in his mind. Later that evening, Arthur sat in his sprawling Manhattan penthouse, the city skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. But his mind was far from the negotiations dominating his schedule. Instead, his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman with the violin case, the way she had brushed him off so effortlessly. A quick internet search revealed her identity. Amanda Ribeiro, a talented violinist with a growing reputation in the New York classical music scene. Arthur scrolled through articles and concert reviews, intrigued by her passion and independence. She was a world apart from the women he usually encountered, women who were drawn to his wealth and status. Arthur smirked at himself. When had he ever cared about someone who wasn't interested in him? Still, the idea of meeting her again lingered, pulling at him in a way that nothing else had in years. The concert hall was filled with soft murmurs as the audience settled into their velvet seats. Arthur had pulled a few strings to get a front-row ticket to Amanda's performance. As the orchestra tuned their instruments, he felt a curious anticipation building within him. Amanda stepped onto the stage, her violin poised gracefully in her hands. The moment she began to play, the world seemed to melt away. Arthur watched, captivated by her raw emotion, the way the music seemed to flow through her. She wasn't just performing, she was living the music. When the concert ended, and the applause thundered through the hall, Arthur found himself standing without thinking, clapping harder than anyone else. He had to meet her again. As Amanda packed up her violin after the performance, Arthur approached her, heart thudding slightly. "That was incredible," he said, his voice more sincere than he expected. Amanda glanced at him, her face impassive. "Thanks," she said curtly, still packing her things. "Can I take you for a coffee?" As a proper apology for earlier, Arthur offered. She shook her head, not even meeting his eyes. "No thanks," she said. "I'm busy." With that, she walked away, leaving him standing there, rejected for the second time. Arthur stepped out into the chilly evening air, still processing her sharp dismissal. Most people would have taken the hint, but Arthur Montoro was not most people. He had never been turned down like this before, and the challenge stirred something in him. He wasn't about to give up. As Amanda walked further down the street, Arthur followed at a respectful distance, hoping for another chance to strike up a conversation. But she kept her pace quick, her expression focused. "Why am I chasing after her?" he thought to himself, bemused by his own actions. But there was something about her, something that drew him in, made him want to understand her world. The next time, he told himself, he'd do better. In her small Brooklyn apartment, Amanda collapsed onto the couch, setting her violin case aside. Her modest home, filled with sheet music and art, was her sanctuary. The confrontation with Arthur lingered in her thoughts, but she quickly brushed it away. Men like him were nothing but trouble, privileged, entitled, and always expecting the world to fall at their feet. Still, something about his persistence unnerved her. Why couldn't he just let it go? Amanda had spent her entire life avoiding men like Arthur Montoro, men who represented everything she distrusted. She'd worked too hard to get where she was to let anyone derail her focus. The upcoming concert was the only thing that mattered. Yet, as she prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths might cross again. Back in his penthouse, Arthur poured himself a drink, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. His younger brother, Lucas, lounged on the couch, watching him with amusement. "You're unusually quiet tonight," Lucas remarked, raising an eyebrow. Arthur sighed. "I met someone." "Really?" Lucas perked up, a grin spreading across his face. "And let me guess, she's not impressed by your billions?" Arthur shot him a look. "Exactly." Lucas laughed, shaking his head. "I've told you, money can't buy everything." Arthur paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want to impress her with money. I want to know her, Lucas. She's different." Lucas's expression softened. "So, what's your plan? Flowers and fancy dinners aren't going to cut it." "I know," Arthur said, determination settling in. "I need to show her that I'm more than what she thinks." Lucas chuckled. "Good luck with that, brother. You've got your work cut out for you." As Arthur finished his drink, a plan began to form in his mind. He wasn't sure what it would take to break through Amanda's walls, but he was determined to find out. Arthur had been thinking for days about how to approach Amanda again without scaring her away. His usual charm and wealth had no effect on her, which meant he needed to dig deeper. His first attempt, showing up with tickets to the opera, had failed miserably. This time, he had something different in mind. Amanda's rehearsal was in full swing when Arthur arrived at the small studio she frequented. The walls were lined with old posters, and the faint echo of violin notes filled the room as he stepped in quietly. He had a gift in hand, not jewelry, but a rare sheet music edition of one of Amanda's favorite composers, something he knew would mean more to her than any expensive trinket. Amanda, mid-rehearsal, noticed him the moment he walked in, though she continued playing until the end of the piece. When the music stopped, she sighed, already anticipating another gesture of grandeur. As she put her violin down, Arthur stepped forward. "Before you ask," he said quickly, "this isn't some elaborate stunt. I just thought you might like this." He handed her the gift, his expression softer than before. Amanda hesitated, eyeing the package suspiciously. She opened it slowly, revealing the rare music score, her eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, her guard dropped, and Arthur saw a flicker of appreciation. "It's beautiful," she admitted, running her fingers over the worn pages. "But I can't accept this." "I know I'm not your favorite person right now," Arthur replied, "but I wanted to give you something that matters to you." Amanda gave him a measured look. "Thank you, but I'm not someone you can win over with things." Arthur's face softened, realizing how much he still had to learn about her. "I'll take that to heart," he said with a small smile, stepping back. "But just so you know, I'm not giving up." As he left the studio, Amanda found herself watching him go, her mind wrestling with the conflicting emotions he stirred within her. The next day, Amanda stood in front of her class of young violin students, correcting their posture as they clumsily tried to navigate their bows. The class was one of her favorite parts of the week, a time when she could share her passion with the next generation of musicians. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Arthur and the rare music score. Why would a man like Arthur Montoro care about her? She wasn't blind to his wealth, but it was his persistence that puzzled her. She had dealt with men who thought they could buy her attention before, but Arthur was different. He was earnest, almost as if he didn't know how to be anything but himself around her. During a break, she confided in her friend Nina, who often joined her after classes. Nina listened carefully as Amanda described the latest encounter, raising an eyebrow when Amanda mentioned the sheet music. "He brought you a rare score? That's thoughtful," Nina said, leaning against the piano. "Thoughtful, maybe, but I'm not interested in being another conquest," Amanda replied, folding her arms. "Are you sure that's what this is?" Nina asked, a knowing look in her eyes. "Maybe he's just trying to get to know you." Amanda frowned. "He's rich, Nina. His world is a million miles from mine. I can't let myself get caught up in something that isn't real." Nina smiled softly. "Sometimes, people surprise you. Just don't shut him out before you're sure." Amanda nodded, though doubt still clung to her. She wasn't convinced Arthur could ever truly understand her life, but Nina's words lingered in her mind. That evening, Amanda had a performance scheduled at a jazz club in Harlem, a much different setting than her usual concert hall appearances. The club was her sanctuary, a place where she could let go and play with passion, surrounded by people who appreciated the rawness of music without the pretense of high society. She arrived early, tuning her violin and mentally preparing for the night ahead. The warm, dimly lit space was already buzzing with quiet conversations, the scent of whiskey and smoke hanging in the air. Amanda loved the intimacy of the club. The way the audience was so close, you could feel their energy feeding into the music. When the lights dimmed and the first notes of her violin cut through the air, Amanda felt at home. She poured her soul into each stroke of the bow, letting the rhythm of the night carry her away. But as she played, her eyes caught a familiar figure at the back of the room, Arthur. He was sitting quietly, watching her with an intensity that made her heart skip. For the first time, she didn't feel the weight of his wealth or status. He seemed more like a man who genuinely wanted to understand her world. After the performance, Arthur approached her, his demeanor casual, lacking the usual formality she had come to expect. "You were amazing," he said sincerely. Amanda, still catching her breath from the intensity of the set, found herself smiling. "You like jazz?" Arthur shrugged. "I'm learning. But after hearing you play, I think I could get used to it." His relaxed tone caught her off guard, and for the first time, Amanda felt the wall she'd built around herself begin to soften. "Do you want to grab a drink?" she asked, surprising even herself. Arthur nodded, following her to the bar where they ordered 2 whiskeys. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time, Amanda didn't feel like she had to guard herself so fiercely. At the bar, the atmosphere was different. The dim lighting and hum of soft jazz created an intimate space, and Arthur and Amanda sat side by side, sipping their drinks. For a while, they simply enjoyed the silence, letting the moment settle between them. Eventually, Arthur spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about me trying to impress you with things." Amanda raised an eyebrow. Her drink paused midway to her lips. "Have you?" He nodded. "I don't know how else to be. My whole life, I've been surrounded by wealth and status, and that's always worked for me. But with you, it's different. I don't want you to see me as just a rich guy." Amanda looked at him, her expression softening. "It's hard not to, Arthur. You come from a world that feels so distant from mine." Arthur took a deep breath, his eyes focused on his glass. "I feel distant from it too, sometimes. All the money in the world doesn't stop me from feeling trapped." That admission caught Amanda off guard. She had always assumed Arthur loved his life of luxury, but here he was, revealing the weight of it all. "I know what it's like to feel trapped," Amanda said quietly. "In the music world, there are so many barriers, so much judgment. Being a black woman in classical music, it's like I have to prove myself every time I step on stage." They both sat in silence for a moment, the shared feeling of isolation binding them in a way neither had expected. Later that night, Amanda returned to her apartment, her thoughts racing. For the first time since meeting Arthur, she felt her resolve weakening. He wasn't just a rich man chasing her. He was someone genuinely struggling to break free from the expectations that surrounded him. As she sat on her worn-out couch, her violin resting nearby, Amanda reflected on the conversation they had shared. Arthur had opened up in a way that surprised her. There was vulnerability there, a sincerity she hadn't expected. But still, a voice in the back of her mind reminded her of the dangers of getting involved with someone from his world. Could they really bridge the gap between them? Or would his wealth and privilege always stand in the way? Amanda sighed, leaning back and closing her eyes. She had a big concert to focus on, and that needed to be her priority. But even as she tried to push thoughts of Arthur aside, she knew things were starting to change. Slowly but surely, he was breaking down the walls she had so carefully built. Arthur walked into the grand dining room of the Montoro family estate, the imposing structure surrounded by meticulously trimmed hedges and vast, open lawns. Dinner at the estate always felt more like a business meeting than a family gathering. Tonight was no exception. His parents, Robert and Eleanor Montoro, sat at opposite ends of the long dining table, their expressions cool and detached as they discussed the latest developments in the family business. Arthur took his seat, trying to ignore the sense of distance between them. "So, I heard you've been busy," Robert said, his voice laced with subtle judgment. Arthur sighed, already anticipating where this conversation was headed. "I've been seeing someone," he admitted, glancing at his mother, whose expression barely shifted. "Someone," Eleanor repeated, setting down her fork. "Is this person appropriate?" Arthur felt a wave of irritation rising within him. "Her name is Amanda," he said firmly. "She's a talented musician." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "A musician? Interesting." Robert leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "Arthur, we've built this family on tradition and responsibility. You can't just get involved with someone who doesn't understand the weight of our world." "She's not a part of this world," Arthur replied, his tone challenging. "And that's exactly what I need." Eleanor's face softened slightly, but her words remained cold. "Arthur, you have responsibilities. This family needs you focused." The tension between Arthur and his parents was palpable. For so long, he had played the role of the obedient son, but Amanda had opened his eyes to something different, a life that wasn't dictated by wealth and status. "I'm not asking for your approval," Arthur said, standing abruptly, "but I won't let you dictate my life anymore." With that, he left the table, the tension following him out of the room. As he drove away from the estate, He realized how much Amanda had already changed him. Meanwhile, Amanda stood outside the director's office at the conservatory, nervously shifting her violin case from hand to hand. She had been called in to discuss her future, and the timing couldn't have been worse. The director, a tall man with silver hair and a stiff posture, sat behind his desk as Amanda entered. His expression was unreadable as he motioned for her to sit. "Amanda, you're one of our most promising musicians," he began, his voice flat. "But the conservatory is facing budget cuts. Unfortunately, some of our positions are at risk." Amanda's heart sank. She had worked tirelessly to get where she was, and now, her career was hanging by a thread. "We'll be reviewing all our options," the director continued, "but I wanted to let you know that there's no guarantee moving forward." After the meeting, Amanda walked back to her modest apartment, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily on her. She had always prided herself on being independent, on forging her own path. But now, everything she had worked for seemed fragile. Her thoughts drifted to Arthur, and for the first time, she wondered if his world could offer the stability she needed. The following week, Amanda arrived at the concert hall for a rehearsal, her mind still occupied with the threat to her career. As she entered the practice room, one of the staff members approached her with a curious expression. "Amanda, you might want to take a look at this," the staff member said, handing her a document. Amanda's eyes widened as she skimmed the pages. The conservatory had received a generous donation, an anonymous one, large enough to secure several positions, including her own. She didn't need to guess who the donor was. Later that evening, she confronted Arthur at his penthouse. "Did you really think you could just swoop in and fix everything with money?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. Arthur's face fell. "Amanda, I was only trying to help." "Help?" she echoed. "You think I want to be someone you feel the need to save? My career, my life, is not something you can just buy." Arthur stepped forward, his expression pleading. "I wasn't trying to control you. I just didn't want to see you lose everything you've worked for." "That's exactly what this feels like," Amanda shot back, her voice breaking. "Like you're trying to control my life." The hurt in her eyes cut through Arthur like a knife. He had only wanted to protect her, but now, he realized how deeply he had miscalculated. Amanda turned on her heel and left, leaving Arthur standing in the middle of his luxurious penthouse, wondering if he had lost her for good. The argument replayed in Arthur's mind over and over again as he sat in his penthouse, staring at the city skyline. He hadn't heard from Amanda since their blowout, and the silence between them weighed heavily on him. Unable to bear it any longer, Arthur decided to confront her at her apartment. The thought of losing her gnawed at him, and he knew he had to make things right. When Amanda opened the door, her face was guarded. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. "I came to apologize," Arthur said, his tone sincere. "I didn't mean to overstep. I didn't know how else to show you that I care." Amanda crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "You think throwing money at problems is the answer to everything, don't you?" Arthur's gaze dropped to the floor, guilt weighing him down. "That's all I've ever known. I've never had to fight for anything, until I met you." Amanda studied him for a long moment, her expression softening slightly. "I don't need you to fix my life, Arthur. I need you to respect that I can do it on my own." "I do," Arthur said quietly. I don't know how to be anything other than the man I was raised to be, but I want to learn. For you." The sincerity in his voice caught Amanda off guard. For the first time, she saw the man behind the wealth, the man who was struggling to break free from the expectations that had been placed on him all his life. "I need time," she said finally, her voice softer now. "I can't promise anything, but I need to figure things out on my own." Arthur nodded, relief washing over him. "I'll wait as long as you need." Later that night, Arthur sat in his penthouse, feeling more lost than ever. His brother Lucas, who had been keeping tabs on the situation, stopped by, sensing his older brother needed some guidance. Lucas sat on the couch, watching Arthur pace back and forth. "You've got it bad, don't you?" Lucas teased lightly, though his tone held a note of seriousness. Arthur stopped pacing and sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just don't know what to do, Lucas. Everything I've tried has only made things worse. Lucas leaned back, crossing his arms. Maybe that's the problem, Arthur. You're trying too hard to fix things instead of just being real with her. Arthur frowned, turning to face his brother. What do you mean? You're still hiding behind all the wealth and the power, Lucas explained. Amanda doesn't care about any of that. She wants to see the real you, the one that isn't afraid to be vulnerable. Arthur's shoulders slumped as he took in his brother's words. I don't even know who that is. Lucas gave him a small smile. That's the point. You've spent your whole life being the Montoro heir. Maybe it's time to figure out who Arthur really is. Arthur nodded slowly, the weight of his brother's words settling over him. He knew Lucas was right. If he wanted to win Amanda's trust, he had to stop trying to be the man his family expected him to be and start being the man Amanda needed him to be. Arthur stood outside Amanda's modest Brooklyn apartment, clutching a small note he had written earlier. No grand gestures. No lavish gifts. He knew Amanda was growing tired of him using his wealth to show his affection. This time, he had something different in mind. When Amanda opened the door, she was surprised to see him, but the surprise quickly shifted to guarded curiosity. Arthur handed her the note, a simple invitation to visit a local art gallery that he knew she loved. It was the kind of place Amanda frequented, a world far from his usual haunts of expensive restaurants and exclusive clubs. No pressure, he said, his tone softer than usual. I just thought we could spend some time together, without all the distractions. Amanda hesitated. Her instinct was to say no, to push him away again. But there was something different about Arthur this time. The gesture was thoughtful, genuine, and for the first time, it felt like he was trying to meet her on her terms. Okay, she said, nodding. Let's go. As they walked to the gallery, Arthur was unusually quiet. He was trying, really trying, and Amanda noticed. It wasn't easy for someone like him to shed the armor of privilege and wealth, but today, he was taking a step toward being vulnerable, toward showing her who he really was without all the trappings of his billionaire lifestyle. The local art gallery was a small, intimate space, tucked away in a corner of Brooklyn that was far removed from Arthur's usual world. The moment they stepped inside, Amanda felt at ease, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the paintings and sculptures. Arthur watched as Amanda wandered through the gallery, stopping to admire a painting of a woman playing the violin. He could see the joy on her face as she studied the artwork, and for a moment, he felt like he was seeing her in her element, completely at peace. Do you come here often? Arthur asked, stepping up beside her. Amanda nodded. It's one of my favorite places. There's something about the art here. It speaks to me in a way that words can't. Arthur glanced at the painting she was looking at, trying to understand what she saw in it. I'm not much of an art expert, he admitted, but I can see why you love it here. They spent the next hour walking through the gallery, talking about art, music, and life. For the first time, Arthur didn't feel the need to impress her. He simply listened, letting Amanda guide the conversation. It was a shift in their dynamic, one that Amanda noticed and appreciated. As they left the gallery, Amanda felt a warmth toward Arthur that hadn't been there before. He was trying, really trying, and for the first time, she allowed herself to see him in a new light. Back at Amanda's apartment, they sat together on her worn-out couch, the soft glow of evening light filtering through the window. Arthur looked around the cozy space, taking in the stacks of sheet music, the paintings on the walls, the well-loved violin resting in its case. It was a world so different from his own. Yet there was something about it that felt more real, more grounded. I don't know if I've ever told you this, Arthur began, his voice quiet, but I've always felt trapped by the life I was born into. People think having money and power makes everything easy, but it doesn't. It just isolates you. Amanda listened, her usual defenses lowered. This was the side of Arthur she hadn't seen before, the vulnerable side. I know what it's like to feel trapped, she said softly. Being a black woman in classical music isn't easy. There are so many barriers, so many expectations. I have to prove myself every time I step on stage. Arthur looked at her, seeing the strength in her eyes. That's why I admire you so much, he said. You fought for everything you have. I've never had to do that. Amanda shook her head. Everyone has their own battles, Arthur. Yours are just different from mine. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their words hanging between them. Slowly, the emotional walls that had kept them apart began to crumble. In that quiet moment, they both realized that they weren't so different after all. A few days later, Arthur found himself back at his penthouse, staring at an old family document he had unearthed while sorting through some of his family's business files. His heart sank as he read through the details. A business deal his parents had been involved in years ago, one that had devastated a small community in Brooklyn. A community that, Arthur now realized, included Amanda's family. The deal had been part of a larger real estate project, one that had pushed out low-income families to make way for luxury developments. Arthur had been young at the time, too focused on his own life to notice or care about what his family was involved in. But now, it hit him like a punch to the gut. His family's wealth had come at the expense of people like Amanda. Arthur's hands trembled as he set the document aside. He knew what he had to do. He had to tell Amanda the truth, even if it meant losing her. That night, Arthur sat alone in his penthouse, grappling with the weight of the revelation. He wanted to be honest with Amanda, but the fear of losing her gnawed at him. If she knew the truth about his family's role in what had happened to her community, would she ever forgive him? Lucas stopped by later that evening, sensing that something was off. "What's going on with you, man?" he asked, sitting down on the couch next to Arthur. Arthur ran a hand through his hair, the tension clear on his face. "I found something about our family's business. It's connected to Amanda. Her family was affected by one of our real estate deals." Lucas's face fell. "That's rough," he said quietly, "but you've got to tell her." Arthur looked up at his brother, uncertainty in his eyes. "What if she never forgives me?" Lucas placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't get to decide that. But if you care about her, you owe her the truth. Hiding it isn't going to make things better." Arthur nodded, knowing Lucas was right. He couldn't keep the truth from Amanda, no matter how much it hurt. He had to tell her everything. Arthur stood outside Amanda's apartment, the cold wind biting at his skin, but the chill in the air paled in comparison to the dread settling in his chest. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head, but now, as he raised his hand to knock on her door, the weight of what he was about to say seemed unbearable. Amanda opened the door, her face lighting up briefly before she saw the tension etched in Arthur's expression. "Arthur? What's wrong?" He took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something about my family." Her brow furrowed, concern replacing the initial warmth. "Come in," she said softly. Inside, they sat across from each other in the small living room. Arthur's hands were clenched together as he struggled to find the right words. "There's something I've been hiding from you. I didn't mean to, but I didn't know how to tell you." Amanda's gaze hardened. "What is it?" Arthur closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his courage. "Years ago, my family was involved in a real estate deal. A deal that ended up displacing a lot of people from a neighborhood in Brooklyn." "Your neighborhood?" Amanda froze. Her eyes narrowed as she tried to process what he was saying. "What do you mean?" "My parents were part of a development project that pushed out low-income families to make room for luxury condos. I didn't realize until recently that your family was one of the ones affected." Amanda's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced back to the struggles her mother had faced trying to keep their home, the long legal battles, the sense of helplessness. "You knew? And you didn't tell me?" Arthur's voice cracked. "I didn't know at first, and when I found out, I didn't know how to tell you." "I'm so sorry, Amanda. I should have been honest with you from the start." Her face flushed with anger. "You think sorry is enough? My mother worked her whole life to keep our home, and your family's greed took it away." Arthur stood, pacing the room, his heart pounding. "I didn't know how much it would hurt you. I wasn't a part of it, but I know that doesn't change anything." "You're right. It doesn't change anything," Amanda said, her voice trembling with rage. "How can I trust you after this? How can I believe anything you say?" Arthur's heart sank. He had feared this moment, but hearing the words out loud stung more than he'd imagined. "Amanda, I know I've hurt you, but I love you. I didn't want this to come between us. Please, let me make this right." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "You can't make this right. You should have told me the truth. Instead, you hid it, hoping it would just go away. Arthur's shoulders slumped. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I love you, Amanda, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Amanda's voice was cold. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't even know if I want to try. Amanda sat on her bed later that night, the weight of Arthur's confession pressing down on her. Her heart ached with betrayal. Everything she had believed about their relationship now seemed tainted by the knowledge of what his family had done to hers. She thought of her mother, who had struggled for years to hold on to their home, only to lose it because of the greed of people like Arthur's parents. How could she ever look at him the same way again? And yet, despite her anger, a part of her couldn't help but remember the way Arthur had changed over the past few months. He had worked so hard to show her that he was different from the world he came from, that he cared about her beyond wealth and status. Was that all a lie? Or was there some truth in the man she had grown to love? Amanda's mind swirled with confusion. She didn't know if she could trust him again, but she couldn't deny the feelings she still had for him. Love wasn't supposed to be this complicated, but here she was, torn between her heart and her pride. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she would ever find clarity in this storm of emotions. Arthur hadn't slept all night. He couldn't stop thinking about the look of hurt and betrayal in Amanda's eyes, and he knew he had to make one last attempt to win her back. He needed her to understand that despite the mistakes his family had made, his love for her was real. That evening, Amanda had a performance at the jazz club, and Arthur decided to go. It was the only place where he could truly see her for who she was, and maybe, just maybe, it was the place where she would finally see him for who he had become. As Amanda played, her music filled the room with raw emotion, and Arthur felt every note like a knife to the heart. He could hear the pain in her playing, the anger, the sadness. She was pouring everything into her performance, and it took everything in him to not rush to the stage. When the performance ended and the applause faded, Arthur waited for Amanda at the bar. She approached cautiously, her face unreadable. Amanda, I came here because I need you to know something, Arthur began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I know I hurt you, and I know I've made mistakes, but I love you. I've never loved anyone the way I love you. Amanda's eyes softened, but her defenses remained up. Love isn't enough, Arthur. Not when trust is broken. I understand that, he said, but I'm not giving up on us. I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I'm not the man you think I am. I'm not like my family. I want to be better for you. She looked away, her heart warring with her mind. I don't know if I can trust you again. Arthur's voice cracked. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll do whatever it takes. But please, Amanda, don't shut me out. The silence between them was heavy, but it was Amanda who finally spoke. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I'll try. Arthur's heart soared, and he reached for her hand, but she pulled away gently. This doesn't mean everything is okay. It's going to take time. I understand, he said softly, and I'll be here, no matter how long it takes. Amanda spent the next few days in a haze of reflection, replaying Arthur's words over and over in her mind. He had hurt her deeply, but she couldn't deny the sincerity of his apology. He was willing to wait, willing to fight for her. But was that enough? After much contemplation, Amanda decided she needed to see him again, to talk through everything before making her final decision. She called Arthur and asked him to meet her at her apartment. When he arrived, he looked anxious but hopeful, and she could see the toll the past few days had taken on him. I've been thinking a lot, Amanda began, her voice calm but firm. I'm still angry about what your family did. That's not something I can just forget. But I also know that you're not responsible for their actions. You've shown me that you're capable of change. Arthur nodded, listening intently. I don't want to be the person I was raised to be. I want to be better, for you, for us. Amanda sighed, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. It's going to take time, Arthur. A lot of time. Trust doesn't come back overnight. I'm willing to wait, he said, his voice steady. She looked him in the eye, searching for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was sincerity, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Okay, Amanda said quietly, we'll try. Arthur's face lit up with relief, and though she wasn't ready to embrace him fully, Amanda knew that this was a new beginning for them. It wouldn't be easy, but love rarely was.